Testing, 1, 2, 3. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can kindly take our seats, and then we can begin proceedings. Thank you so much for being here this morning. My name is Eusebius McKaiser. I'm a political analyst, a broadcaster, and author, and it is an absolute pleasure to be hosting the release of the GBV report this morning, which is an initiative that is collaborative between Shared Value Africa Initiative as well as the University of Johannesburg. And of course, we're being hosted by the JSE this morning. Just in case you have post-COVID fear, I'm not infectious. I've actually successfully recovered despite my voice, not from COVID, I just had flu. And I'm channeling also just Tina Turner, hence the raspy voice. It is unfortunate, in my opinion, as an analyst, that we are focusing this morning on the economic impact of not addressing gender-based violence in the workplace. It is a critically important piece of research, don't get me wrong, but where it is unfortunate, at least the lawyer in me thinks so, is that we would have thought that by now we live in a country where women's rights are regarded as human rights, and that the moral imperative to take gender justice seriously should be a sufficient motivator for us to change our behavior, starting with our mindsets and then our behavior. And unfortunately, in the heart of capitalism, we now have to appeal to economic logic and not only to human rights-based logic. And sometimes you have to skin a cat in many different ways. So it's not that this report doesn't care about asking ethical questions, nor human rights-based questions, but it is interesting to also examine what the opportunity costs are, quite literally, in terms of the wastage of human resources and therefore not maximizing shareholder value if you don't pay attention to gender-based violence in the workplace. And if you have a thick fact basis for understanding the economics, it also gives you additional data with which to hold leadership accountable, and that will be one of the themes that we will tease out this morning. But to start us off, I want to first ask Peliswa Mayakiso, who's the head group communications and media at the JSE, to just say a couple of words by way of welcoming us, and then also, I think we might be slightly late, but at least symbolically opening the markets, so to speak. Can we please welcome her to the stage?
Can everyone see me? You can hear me, right? Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the JSE. Firstly, apologies from our CEO, Dr. Leila Fourie. She would have loved to be here this morning, but unfortunately, she just had a board commitment. So unfortunately, she's not here, but she sent me as a good replacement. Just to echo what Eusebius has just said, it really is unfortunate that this Women's Month, we're here for a very sobering topic around the impact of gender-based violence and the economic impact on gender-based violence, which has continued to plague our country. It is really unfortunate that we continue having the same conversations over and over. And it is it's a collective responsibility for all of us as individuals and organizations to create the safe public workspaces that we require as women, as people that identify in whatever category they want to identify in, and to be an advocate for really meaningful change, which is, I think, the big thing that's really missing. I think it's very unfortunate that we continue talking and talking and talking, but the action really doesn't happen. As citizens of corporate South Africa, it is our duty, most of all, and to have the power within our circles of influence to really, really drive and eradicate the heinous attacks around gender-based violence. The JSE stands together with all stakeholders that are in the ongoing effect to eradicate gender-based violence. At the JSE, we really take this responsibility very seriously. We have numerous work policies where we help our colleagues to work through it so that they can also report gender-based violence, as well as giving them time off work. The one thing with gender-based violence, the scars can be internal, but they also are external. And it is such a big stigma, particularly for women around us. So we give them that opportunity. But I think most importantly, we put our money where our mouth is, and we fund gender-based violence initiatives through various funding programs across South Africa, which is very crucial. Again, I have the confidence that the launch of this report will once again play as the catalyst in developing bigger and better solutions to eradicate gender-based violence. Like they say, the market waits for no one. I would like to now invite us to open the market symbolically. Dade Bonang, can you please come up? Prof. Mervyn King, Tiki, Prof. Corneille, please also come up. I think there are two more people I'm missing. We're just going to come to the instruments over here. Who else is coming? Okay, like I said, the market waits for no one. Who's gonna? Yeah, it's just symbolic. You just blow. Yeah, I'm gonna do a countdown from 10 down, and then we'll clap hands, and then they'll blow the instruments. But very importantly, and there are a lot of statistics that back this up. There's a direct correlation. Our trading floor is right underneath you guys. And there's a direct correlation between how loudly we blow and make a sound in terms of how well the market trades. So please join me in. Okay. Sihle, can we do the countdown? Are we ready? So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Well done.
I feel like it's World Cup again. I should be bursting into It's Time for Africa. We're going to get on with the main program immediately. Someone I've worked with for many years is Tiki Barnard, who is deeply committed to gender justice. And a lot of the work that her company does, Shared Value Africa Initiative, is around gender justice, not just in South Africa, but around the continent as well, where they have deep footprints. And I invite her to come and reflect on this piece of research that is really close to her heart individually, but also what some of the thoughts are in relation to how they had set it up. And because we are good friends, I know she's also going to reflect on something that I gave her a tough time on, which is why so many men are on the program, in a program that is about gender-based violence. She's an absolutely brilliant woman. Can we please welcome her to stage?
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the report because my counterpart, Corneille, here is going to take you through all of that today. What I want to do today is to say welcome to everybody and thank you so much for making the time to being here today. I want to leave you with 3 thoughts today. The first one is that gender-based violence is not a societal issue only. It is a business issue that affects our business every single day. Research tells us that 1 in 3 women will be affected by gender-based violence in their lifetime. So let's do the maths. If we employ 15 women, 5 of them will be affected by gender-based violence. And the shared value business management concept, when they ask us to build sustainable and profitable business, advocates for us to address those issues from a societal and an environmental issue that's holding our businesses back. And the UN Sustainable Development Goals define those issues that's holding our business back so beautifully. And there's one SDG that runs like a golden thread through all of them, and that's SDG number 5, gender equality. Secondly, today, what I want to share with you is that gender inequality is the biggest driver of gender-based violence. And private sector has the capacity, has the resources, has the power to change economies forever if you intentionally and deliberately address gender-based violence in the workplace. And there's many reports that's been written about the cost of gender-based violence, but yet we're here today because gender-based violence persists. Lastly, on the research, and I want to thank Corné and Nesu and Prof. Gustav from the bottom of my heart. What we try to do, the purpose of our research, is to share the human impact of gender-based violence. And the intention for us is, the prayers, the hopes, is that we will shift male leadership mindsets. And we need to drive accountability. And we want to influence through the research, we want to influence organizations to look at your gender-based violence and policies and make changes. That's what we want you to do, because we have to do it. I was speaking to Prof earlier on, and there is no time like now. We're moving into, all of us are busy with our ESG reporting. We really, really need to do it now. And Eusebius, before I hand back to you to answer your question about why the male lineup today. And I just want to say, as women, our voices are clearly not heard. So for me today, and for us from a research perspective, we want our male leadership to raise their voices, to intentionally and deliberately commit to take action, to address gender inequality in the workplace, and help us to eradicate gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiki. I appreciate that so much. And for me, the parallel with race is always instructive. It's amazing why we persist in asking the survivors and the victims of oppression to also be the ones that lead the solution space. Where if we know how to oppress, we should be the ones also undoing the oppression. That is as true of racism as it is of gender oppression. And that's why it's important for men to do it. By the way, if you are tweeting away, which I hope some of you are, and multitasking, the hashtag, it's not okay. I also want to again thank our various partners, including KPMG, who's been a really important support for the research team as well, and many of our other partners here. I'll say a little bit more about them later on. Dr. Phumzile Lambengcuka doesn't need introduction. She was unable to be here, but I generously said a few remarks about the critical importance of this research. She, of course, as we know, is a well-known and excellent South African politician, deeply committed to gender justice, both here and globally. It was an important part of her work at the United Nations. And of course, she's now again also in a leadership position as incoming Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. And she's going to be speaking into the theme of the importance broadly of some of the elements that come out of this research.
Greetings and congratulations to the University of Johannesburg, Mid Sweden University, KPMG Africa, Shared Value Africa Initiative. Thank you for inviting me to this event, and thank you for producing this report, which helps us to understand the impact of gender-based violence and femicide in our different spheres, be it economic or social. This is a shadow pandemic. Gender-based violence is a pandemic that was there before the COVID pandemic. It was there during the COVID pandemic. It even increased during lockdown. It is still there. It is not responded to comprehensively. It is not prosecuted in a convincing manner. But all of us in society, in our different stations, need to take action and to do our best to eliminate it. As the report shows us, there is something we can do as employers and as colleagues. At the workplace, we need to be sure that we have the policies that can be used to both prevent as well as hold our employees accountable for their behavior. We know that at the workplace, it would be the senior people who often harass and exploit women, and that creates immense pressure on the women. The bulk of the women, though, experience violence at home, in the hands of their loved one. Children experience violence from their loved ones, and it even becomes difficult for both women and children to report and to take action. But we cannot be bystanders. We need at the workplace to provide a possible place for women who has experienced violence to find refuge, be it counseling or medical services. We need to support her in case she decides to take the matter up with courts, because we know how traumatic and lonely that road is. We need to make sure that amongst our employees, we do not have people who harass other workers, people who are serial perpetrators of emotional or other violence against women. We need to be sure when we employ people that in their reference checks, we can see their behavior, and we can tell in some cases where there could be a history of violence against women. Men also experience harassment and violence against women. That too, we have to take up. We have to call it out as well. We must not allow toxic masculinity to make men feel that they cannot say something when they have experienced violation. We also need to address younger people. We need men as role models who can address this violence and show the different type of masculinity that is not toxic. Show that it is possible to be a man and be good. These two are not at opposite ends. I hope that as we read this report, we will recognize that this is a labor relations issue. We will also recognize that this also calls for presence of women in our senior positions, so that together as inclusive organizations, we can discuss and call out violence against women and take action. Organizations that are gender blind always makes decisions that discriminate against the gender that is not included. We must also not forget that there are not two genders. We have diverse gender, men, women, and LGBTQI+. We also have to think about them and the violence we experience. I wish you good deliberations today, and happy Women's Day and happy Women's Month.
Thank you very much in absentia to Dr. Lambutruka. A lot there to chew on. It gives me great pleasure to next invite Prof. Mervyn King. I said in my opening remarks how unfortunate but important, nevertheless, it is that we focus on the economics around the impact of gender-based violence on the economy, and in particular, our individual workplaces and different sectors of the economy. What is obviously well known about Prof. King's work is precisely that he is deeply committed to making sense conceptually and practically of ethics and ethical leadership. And he's going to be focusing on a couple of things, but in particular, the role of the private sector when it comes to this conversation. He wears so many different hats, but we invite him today as Chair Emeritus of the International Integrated Reporting Council and the Global Reporting Initiative. Thanks so much for being with us. Can we please welcome him into this space?
Thank you, Eusebius, for the invitation, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me here today. Since 1992, I've been talking about boards learning and understanding the needs, interests, and expectations of the various stakeholders in a company, but always making a decision in the best long-term interest of the company. Because if one gets that right, it's in the best long-term interest of all the stakeholders. And this debate sometimes about what is the audience that a board is reporting to forgets that the law lays down quite clearly that a board owes its duty of care, skill, diligence, and good faith to the company, not to the shareholder. We went through a century of the primacy of the shareholder. Today, thank heavens, we're at a stage where essential questions are asked. How has the company made its money? And what value has it added to society? And what have been the impacts of how it has made its money on the environment, society, and of course the economy? With this in mind, I was chairman of the United Nations on Governance and Oversight. And we discussed back in 2001, 2002, the question of sustainability. And as you all know, it took some time for the SDGs to be issued, 2015 to be precise. And they were launched on the basis that it was hoped that it would be a blueprint for achieving a better and more sustainable future for all of us and those who came after us. Well, sustainable development in the private sector is absolutely critical, and Eusebius is right. The SDGs were issued, 16 of them, the 17th being collaboration. SDG 5 was and is gender equality. A subset of gender equality is violence, intimidation, because if you get equality, you will eradicate the violence and the intimidation. We in the corporate reporting world came to a realization that we could no longer focus on enriching shareholders, because the principle that you increase wealth at the top and it would trickle down to the impoverished at the bottom, I'm afraid failed dismally, and the trickle became treacle. It stuck at the top. It never came down. And so we now have a value creation proposition. What value has this company added to society? And patently, the question of gender equality becomes critical. In the research which has been done inter alia, Citigroup has found that if you have gender equality and parity of payment in the workplace between male and female, you could increase the global GDP by 3%, which in dollar terms is $2 trillion US, and you would create an additional 420 million jobs. Quite extraordinary. So the cost to a company that doesn't practice gender equality, which is one of the 16 SDGs, is eventual compensation claims against the company and reputational damage. Today, if you look at the balance sheets of company, the additives in a balance sheet only make up 20% of the market cap. The market cap is made up of these ESG issues. And one of the critical ESG issues is gender equality. I am at the moment in the middle of negotiations with the international bodies, and I was telling Tiki I'm speaking in October in Madrid to the PIOB, the Public Interest Oversight Board, which oversees the Financial Standards Board. And the International Financial Standards Board has, by public demand, created the International Sustainability Standards Board. And as I'm speaking to you, there are leaders in the corporate reporting world that are drafting standards. The time has come to draft a corporate reporting standard on gender equality. Every company in reporting should report on what they have done in regard to gender equality in the world. And people in the capital markets of the world can then make up their mind. Do they want to invest long-term for their beneficiaries, such as a pension fund, in the equity of this company that has had no regard to gender equality and, for example, has greenwashed its report? If we have a standard on gender equality to be reported, laid down in the ISSB standards, which are being drafted now, laid down in the EU by EFRAG, the Economic Financial Reporting Group, the SEC is busy drawing its disclosure requirements. They focused on climate change and things of this nature. There hasn't been one mention of gender equality. Now is the time to change that corporate reporting. So when companies report, they report on the question of what they've done to make sure of parity of payment, for example, doing the same job, and what they've done generally in regard to gender equality. So a board should apply its mind and should be asking the question, always, in my judgment, this business judgment call which we're about to make, how will it impact on gender equality. And if we can get that into the standards, there'd be huge advancement on gender equality. And remember that violence is a subset of that equality. If you get that quality standardized, you will start eradicating violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. King. It was characteristically excellent, and thank you for your life's work, really. I think there's a deep puzzle. We may not have time for it on the panel, but maybe we will. I'll just let it hang in the air. I've always, for many years, struggled, and maybe it's a non-economic question, with why it is that despite so many evidence-based reports coming out of either initiatives like today's or from academic institutions, Harvard Business School report, your McKinsey reports, we used to have it in relation to diversity, making the data-driven case for why diversity is conducive to maximizing value. And still, diversity is only rhetorically really committed to by so many corporate citizens. And the same has to go. That stunning stat that you gave just hit me like a lightning bolt in terms of the opportunity cost for job creation and also adding to an expansion of the economy, which raises the question, why would capitalist men in particular, who are the decision makers as CFOs, CIOs, CEOs, why do we shoot ourselves in the foot? Do we hate women so much that we're prepared to forego extra profit in order to sustain domination? Next up is one of my favorite South Africans, Prof. Bonang Mohale. Also needs no introduction. Excellent business leader. Brilliant author, by the way. Please buy any and all of his books. A great interlocutor. I wish myself, as the moderator, good luck in getting him to speak for only 6 minutes. But he is going to speak on the very important related question of conscious and intentional leadership. Can we welcome him to the space?
Professor Mervyn King, Roy Anderson, and Michael Juden are only the 3 members of the King 4 committee who started the King 1. And the 3 of them are still healthy, young, and mentis corpus. So when I turn 40, I want to look like them. I think it makes sense why men should also be just as concerned about issues of GBV, because they hold the levers of power. Because whenever we talk about GBV, our focus is on the victim, which is mostly women, but not on the perpetrators. Imagine for a second when we can be successful in looking back and say, we have raised these boys well. Because when we imbue them with good values, they know that they are the good quality human beings that they were meant to be, that they should treat every other woman the same way that their own sisters ought to be treated. The world will be a better place. Imagine for a moment when we can come to a place that says, if we could have conversations about this notion of discernment, to know the people who are around us but are not with us. There are many men who are with us that are not being utilized to address some of the things that keep us awake at night. Business has a fundamental role to play in this, because pre-COVID, business employed 16.5 million people. All 3 tiers of government, 2.3 million people, if you include all the people that are affected and infected by their programs. Directly 1.3 million people. So if business can be transformed, South Africa will be transformed. I think we need to focus on business because only business understands this notion of project management, how to deliver mega projects on time, in full, and on budget. When governments the world over are really struggling with this notion. The last piece of work that we did in the last quarter of last year says business is trusted twice as much as governments. Therefore, it's businesses that need to kick down the doors that are closed to women, to bring down the proverbial, not glass ceiling, but the concrete ceiling that we ourselves have created. It is men that are uncomfortable about being surrounded by good quality women being there. For the work needs to be done by men, because like we do in businesses, society expects men to be managing directors, presidents, and CEOs, not women. Therefore, as a beneficiary of patriarchy, what am I doing to use this positional power that I have to make it that much easier for women to assume their rightful place in society? Because it's manifestly in our interest that women should do well. You see, the pandemic has taught us many things. Of the 8 countries that dealt well with the pandemic, all of them had women as heads of state than those that men are heads of state. But science is replete with examples that when we put a smartphone in the hands of women, not only does the nutrition, the health, and education of their own children improve, but of the entire society in which they are located and the community from which they come. So picking up from the incredible work that is being done by people like Mervyn, I'm a member of the Committee of Chairpersons of the World Economic Forum. Our last meeting was on the 23rd of May, because remember, we couldn't meet the last January because of the pandemic. On the agenda, we dealt only with 3 things. First was this unjustified, unprovoked, and unwarranted invasion of Ukraine by Russia. The second, of course, was the pandemic. The third was the issue of gender equality. We met with the president of the country, Madam Cyril Ramaphosa, on the 28th of January, where we were sharing with him just the 6 things that we are going to do as business, with or without government, better with their support. Because all of us accept that this is not the South Africa that we've been praying for. We are in a spot of bother. This is not the South Africa of Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela's dreams. And in sharing those 6 things that we as a business are going to invest in, gender equality was one of them. So when we spoke to him 9 times on the 9th of February, because on the 10th he was delivering the State of the Nation address, he was looking for a name of this red tape czar. We raised the issue of women representations in position of leadership. Because at that time, there was 60.1 million of us as South Africans as per the last census. The next census, when the results are out, it will probably say there's 65 million of us. 90% of that population is black. 51% is women. And yet women's representation in positions of leadership is less than 24%. African women less than 4%. So the economic impact of excluding women is devastating and too dire, because the world will be that much more of a better place if we put women in the center of everything that we do. You see, when we went to the polls on the 27th of April, 1994, at exactly the same time, a country not far from where we are, Rwanda had massacred 800,000 Tutsis. At the end of that month, that number went to 1 million. 20 years later, Rwandans don't speak about Tutsis or Hutus. They speak only about Rwandans. When you go to Kigali, you find Wi-Fi in public transport. Women at 23, 30, they, with their Maltese poodle, go to an ATM and withdraw money, put it in their purse, and go back home safely. And yet I can't do the same in Bedfordview midday at an engine garage to go and take money and make a dash between the ATM and my car and make it safely. So it's something that we have done that have affected us as a people with great natural endowment, because we are born of pain and of suffering, and yet we have not healed because we haven't given ourselves time to reflect as to the things that are keeping us awake at night. So as I end, Eusebius, you see, there are so many things that we can do as business where we don't need government's permission. We don't need government's permission to pay small and medium enterprises in 30 days. 68% of those businesses are owned by women. We're beginning to measure at BUSA, the apex organization, those organizations, our members, that are paying businesses in 7 days. We don't need government's permission to address issues of gender equality and pay parity. It needs only one question as a CEO asking of a human capital department to say, could you print for me on Monday when I get to the office so that we can see how we are paying women versus men for work of equal value? We don't need government's permission to address issues of GBV and LGBTQI+ community, because for me, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. But belonging is bringing your own music and being allowed to play it. So when one steadily burns the midnight oil, one gains access to the domain of knowledge and wisdom, the world of meaning, the world that cannot be conquered without a persistent crusade. So what we want to do in business is to bring this notion of cooperative governance, which is the separation of ownership from control. To say, can we as business use our voice judiciously, regain our integrity, our reputation, and our credibility, because we have lost it. Because how is it possible that we can talk about state capture and say in the first 5 years, 1.5 trillion South African rands was stolen? And in the 9 wasted years, 200 billion siphoned off a year every year on average, just to the 2 Zupta families, without that money going through the financial systems and therefore through our banks. How is it possible? So we want to use business, the force, the impetus, to leverage that so that maybe, just maybe as a business, we could be the voice of the voiceless, to release better humans, to help our people to graduate from humankind to being kind humans. Where as leaders, it is easy for us to be accessible and to be spoken to, so that we don't miss the moment that there must be a reason why we're in those positions of leadership. Because none of us can be okay and well and be prosperous until and unless all of us are prosperous and well. And in the world, there are more women than there are men. How do we use business to solve some of the intractable problems of society, so that our children, these boys, can be responsible members of society, incredibly useful citizens. Because men learn, and young boys learn by looking at the back of the heads of their fathers. You see a child that is not embraced by his village will burn it down in order to feel its warmth.
Thank you, Bonang. I like the analogy about inclusion, but what if I bring Amapiano to work? And soon you're going to hear, he's just not a fit for the company. Like I said, KPMG South Africa has also been supporting this initiative, and it gives me great pleasure to ask Ignatius Sahula to also speak to the importance of why we can no longer ignore the impact of GBV, and sadly also the F, which Dr. Lambagluka drew our attention to. Violence is a word that we've become desensitized to. We have violence, but we also have an epidemic of femicide in this country. Can we please welcome Ignatius as well?
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I think it's always a danger if you have to come and speak after the two profs. I left my speech there because it's all been covered, so there's no point. So I thought instead, I see it's majority female, but I thought instead I'll talk to the men that are in this house. While we're having tea before we started, I was talking to some few people, and I was telling them that on Tuesday, I was sitting and talking to my daughter about this Women's Day and the events around it and everything. And she brought it to my attention that we're now being called a red country. And I did not know what that was. Now, for those of you that don't know, it's because that we are the worst in the world as a country when it comes to GBV. We have that unenviable title of being the red country. Now, as I speak, don't forget, and that's why I said I thought I'll talk to the men. Don't forget that we are, as men, the perpetrators of all of this. You know, as the two profs have indicated, the cost of not eradicating this gender inequality and the opportunity that we lose. So it's not, you don't need to do the right thing in terms of gender because of your sense of charity. It's not because of that. Or you're not being a better human being by showing that sense of compassion. It's got nothing to do with that. Just the business imperative of it gives you no option but to do it. As a CEO, as a CFO, as a department head, whatever you do at work, your stakeholders look up to you to maximize their return in their organization in a sustainable fashion. If, as a CEO, as a manager, you continuously ignore opportunities to maximize stakeholder value, in the fullness of time, you should be fired because you don't deserve to be there. Now, some people might say, listen, I never knew that there's this much economic benefit in doing the right thing. But research has been done over and over again. There should be no excuse that people don't know. So maybe your stakeholders might not be able to hold you to account for whatever reason. But how about holding ourselves to account? We've been entrusted with these positions to perform. And that's why one of the recommendations coming out of this research that I like, it's about reporting. Because you tend to get what you measure. So I think it's about time that we have these measurements and we report in our ESG, in our integrated reports. And then people can hold the mirror to our faces and say, how have you done? Now, when I was talking to my daughter on Tuesday, she said to me, you know, it's sad because I remember post-democracy, we were one of the countries that were held up in there, compared favorably around the world, that we have X number of women in parliament, X number of women in cabinet. We were kind of a model to empower women. And she said, Dad, what happened? And I said, you know, she's not an accountant, you know. So I said to her, in our profession, we have something called substance over form. That what you saw is what happens when you put form over substance. It was just the form, look at us. But the underlying reality had not changed for women. So as a manager, as a CEO, as whatever you are in your organization, you can choose to do form over substance. And if you do so, I can promise you, it will, in a matter of time, it will be undone. So as we go, we have this message now as guys, as we go and go into the field and do what's right, let's remember to be committed and only do true gender equality. Not the form, but the substance. With those few words, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a fad. This is something we have to do for our own human survival, for our own survival of the companies that we run, but for the survival of this crumbling economy of ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ignatius. You would have noticed from the slide that Mid-Sweden University is also one of our partners in this research. And to that end, it is an absolute pleasure to invite here in South Africa and in this space, Prof. Gustav de Lal. Gustav is a senior health economist professor from Mid-Sweden University, has worked across more than 50 countries, and as an academic also has the difficult but also stellar pedigree of having supervised something like more than 90 doctoral students as well. So he really knows what he's talking about. Can we please invite him to the stage?
This will work, or I'll speak there? Okay. So good morning, everyone. I just say one thing. Our home supposed to be the heaven, but we, the men, converted it to hell. It's the naked truth. And then I say one important issue. We have estimated very roughly, based on all secondary data from collected here and there, scratched our head. And even those very shaky information gave us the calculation. Only 2019, you have lost 36 billion rand, only for GBV. And it's highly underestimated. And then I come to the next point, that generally we, human being, it doesn't matter we are how educated or how illiterate, health means only physical health. I did so many questions to common people. Even I asked the taxi drivers, the cleaners in my hotel. They told health is only if I have pain, I don't have pain, I have nothing, blah, blah. But health has 6 dimensions: physical, mental, emotional, social, environmental, and spiritual. And I bring back the most important issue. I know all of you are sitting here are highly educated, esteemed guests. The emotional health and the psychological health, mental health. Mental health, you can think rationally and act accordingly. So now I have the question to all the business persons sitting here, CEO, all these big designation you have, or who are listening outside the room through computer. Do you believe as a perpetrator you are mentally fit or mentally sick? The question is, you, the companies, how you are employing a mentally sick human being, I'm not saying man or woman, in a high ranked position. Because any mentally fit person cannot perpetrate to another individual by any means. But it's happening. Unfortunately, it's happening. And then I bring back one I teach it I was teaching it, not now, at the very basic level of our student, that look, from birth till 18 or 20 years, we do not earn anything. We consume resource from the economy. From 20 to 60 or 65 years, the amount of resource we produce through our human capital, the next 25 or 30 years till death, we consume that. So 20 and 25, 45 years, we are consuming, and this 45 years we are producing. And in South Africa, we have only almost 36% unemployed. So the burden is more. Now, I'm coming back to that topic of health. If I am coming to the job, as employer, you don't know I am mentally, physically, emotionally fit or not. I am sitting on my chair, I am working on my workplace, getting the salary. If I am not mentally fit, emotionally fit, physically fit, the productivity is getting lower and lower and lower. Very interestingly, in the report, you will see afterwards, in 2010, the generation who was victim of the violence, in 2019, the same generation was 3 times more productivity lost. You imagine how much this generation, the last 9-10 years, the South African economy has lost. And what's happening? The economy is shrinking. You are believing now, if you plan, if you prognose, you will find that after 10 years, the South African economy will shrink more. And that already has reflected in your GDP. So don't undermine this point. Second point is that I must bring this to reconsider all of you, that if I sit here, because don't forget, those generation is now around 30 to 39. They already invited through the perpetration as a victim so many diseases in their health. So when this generation after 10 years, after 20 years, sit and work, their salary will be much more higher and their productivity will be much more lesser. So how much gap in the production, resource generation and consumption will be widened? And that I can promise, if you don't take the action from today, from now, your economy will shrink more and more and more. This is the bad health economic investment. You are continuously, knowingly or unknowingly doing it. I can give you now few examples from my work or from my experience. In Japan, through this SAFE community, because I did lot of evaluation for different programs, for different companies and countries. So in Japan, successfully with this same argument, what I gave you now, same argument, we have successfully invited the private companies to take care of the communities. Because they believe that if we take care of our consumer in that community, if they are healthy, they will be a better consumer tomorrow. So any small community will visit in Japan, in the high-rise building, the top floor and the ground floor, they put their storage. So it's a win-win situation. And if there is earthquake, natural disaster, or any injury, they are allowed to take the food from there. And you have seen Japan has successfully reduced the death rate for all natural calamities, for all victims of violence and injuries. I can give you, if you say, okay, Japan is very high ranked, I can give you two examples from Bangladesh. It's one of the poorest country. We use the kindergarten kids. Instead of asking that twinkle, twinkle, little star, this kind of rhymes, with the help of the communication and media personnel, we make the rhymes for violence prevention. I could not transfer it in English exactly, it was in a local language, but the tone was like that: if you beat my mother will be sick, who will cook for me? If I am hungry, how I will educate? If I am not educated, how I will earn for you, my papa? So this kind of rhymes, I can invite all of you from the business perspective, you can initiate in your community, take care of one or two small communities, make a pilot study, and do the change, start the change now, not tomorrow. And you will see that your market is expanding, your GDP will expand, otherwise it will shrink. Another example I can give you, in a very remote part of Thailand, it was alcohol and violence as usual. So we successfully convinced the women that you make a group. In that group, if a man consume alcohol, first night warning, second night pay 500 or 1,000 bucks, third night not allowed to enter into the neighborhood, and fourth night kicked out from the community. He will not be allowed to come back next 1 month. And from that fund they generate, take care for the families and the kids. So the whole poorest community was very famous for, after 1 year, not a single incidence of GBV. So I can ask all of you that, you know this symbol of stop violence. I was part of this movement in WHO, so I could tell you the story, but now time is running out. So say stop violence. Before we all are sitting here, please join hand by hand and promise stop violence from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gustav. I'm going to invite onto the stage also two other panel members, Professor Corne Davis, who's been the lead researcher. Can we please invite her? Give her a warm round of applause. And then also Dr. Anesu Kuhutsai, who's also been a very important part of making sense, particularly of the statistical analysis that has gone into the report. Can we please also welcome them to the space? Prof. Davis, let's kick it off immediately with you. I mean, we've been speaking conceptually and also politically around the importance of this report. What actually is in it? What are some of the main findings?
Wow, that's what everybody wanted to know. We've been dubbing and diving the question now until today. To honor your presence here and the fact that you come to share it with us. And one of the major findings were that there was a willingness amongst leaders in the private sector, firstly, to engage with the topic. We had quite a challenge at first to get the research going. So we followed a network approach that could not have been possible without the network we've established over the last 9 years been a long time coming, and it was very fruitful because it enabled us to speak to leaders at the top. Most of the participants in our conversations with private sector and CEOs, and we couldn't have achieved that without our network of NGOs who work with us, including KMPG, Eradicate, which is a primary part of our research, and of course, Peer Foundation. And what we found was that leaders were aware that gender-based violence is a very prevalent problem in our society. Not many were aware of the exact statistics involved, because the topic has not been communicated on business platforms. So until we did the study, and even now, gender-based violence is not featuring in corporate social responsibility indices, in corporate governance reports, in employee well-being initiatives. It has not featured. So it was interesting that business that it's a problem that we need to address, and that there was a willingness to participate in the business. And then, of course, we had the employee position study as well. So there were also some key findings about what South African employees actually knew about gender-based violence and its prevalence, and what their thoughts were about what should be done, particularly by the private sector, to address those who found out key findings.
Okay, just a couple of questions about the scope of the research. Which sectors of the economy is this a slice of? Who is not implied in the research? And who does it give us a detailed qualitative, quantitative sense of what's going on in?
We were very fortunate that we had a good representation in the study. We had 17 industries that we covered, that were represented. So it's a nice broad spectrum. In terms of our employee perception study, we had a good representation across cultural groups. I must say, we had a very educated sample population in our survey because we marketed predominantly on LinkedIn. So we had a very professional sample population who answered our questions. So across industries and across the population, we had good representation in the survey.
And next, I want to come to you and ask you two set of questions. Just in general, speak to us about what your involvement was, and then more precisely, many of us have intuitions about gender-based violence, the extent to which it's ignored in the home, in the church, sports club, and in the workplace. And many people could struggle to feel like they could be told anything new on a Thursday morning at the JSE that they didn't already know. What for you is important from an evidence point of view that either confirms an intuition that we only knew intuitively, or that is a genuinely new fact?
Okay, so this research was both qualitative and quantitative. So I was mainly involved on the quantitative part of the research. So whereby on the questionnaire design, I gave some input of the questionnaire. Then because in quantitative research, we normally encourage people to make sure that when they do their research, they meet statisticians before they collect the data. So that was done. They came to me. Then we designed the questionnaire together. Then from there, I was also involved in the uploading of the questionnaire into SurveyMonkey, distributed to our target population. Then from there, I then cleaned the data. Then after data cleaning, I was also involved in the analysis of the data. Then after doing the analysis of the data, I was also involved in the write-up of the results. So in that regard, I then realized that there is kind of a reluctance in the society when it comes to key issues such as gender-based violence to participate, because we actually struggled to obtain the 2,270 participants who we managed to then analyze from. It was very difficult to get those sample. So you then see that we were planning originally to distribute this survey for about 3 months, but we ended up distributing it for 8 months. So there was quite a reluctance in the society. So I encourage us as a society that if we are given a platform to participate in such important issues like these, then we come up front, we participate so that we can make a difference in the society. And with quantitative research, it is very important in any type of research because it uses what we call objective data, which is clearly communicated by statistical analysis.
Okay, that's very useful. Gustav, I'm going to ask you one question, and then we'll go to the audience. I hope we've got some roving mics. Thanks, Vio. The data in any diagnostic report is only useful to us instrumentally if it can lead both to a shift in mindset and more than mindset, or maybe an element of mindset, which is actual behavior. In your international comparative studies that you have so many at your fingertips, are there good examples of how we can move the needle from collecting and collating the data diagnostically to changing the behavior? As much as I love Tiki, I don't want to be back here in 2 years with updated data, but the narrative is the same.
Thanks for the question. I should start from the beginning. This report has, I should say it's very balanced. Generally from quantitative we get what, and from qualitative we get why. So this report has both what and why. Only thing missing is from victims and perpetrator perspective. That we have already planned, we are planning. We have so many examples from around the world, and even from South Africa. I was reading one report, and before, it was a report in 2000. Even International Labour Organization, ILO, has recommended it. Before 2000, the workplace bullying was very high in South Africa. And with that research, all the big private companies signed agreement that they should stop bullying at workplace. And in 2 years, the productivity increased up to 40%. So I'm not coming from I'm coming from this same land. So from today, if you sign that agreement, and I can also give one example that in Nordic countries, even now some other countries also, before recruiting someone in a decision-making post, it's mandatory they should go for psychometric test. I don't know you would follow it in South Africa or not. So after that psychometric test, you can also sign one in the decision maker level that they should not be perpetrator of GBV. If you start like this, somewhere you should start. If you start, it will be highlighted. Because the same news coming every day in the media that it's rape, it's violence, it's femicide, blah, blah, blah. We are at the normalization of violence. So it is the time to break the barrier or come up. And the public sector doesn't have that capacity and willingness. Because the more problem is there will be more corruption anywhere in the world. But the private sector, you have the ability and opportunity to do it. So that's why I took, when Corner told me and Tiki invited me, I said, yes, I should go. Because it's a big opportunity to motivate the private sector to start. So if you start it, it will be more impactful. And my esteemed previous speaker, they highlighted the same thing. You have the power, you have the opportunity, you have the so. So start from the decision maker level to all, that if there is any perpetrator as GBV, irrespective of sex and child abuse, you take action. Absolutely. And I can also give example in Nordic countries. You will be immediately under the prison, even if you ask something to your kid. We are not allowed to ask our kids that do it, don't do it. The teacher will explore it and immediately report to the social system. And then they will take the kids to their custody. So this kind of, even 30 years back, it was not there. But we made it. We made the evidence that it's possible. It's not impossible. It's possible. But we need the willingness.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to recognize your hands. We'll bring a mic to you. Any questions that you have, or maybe just insights you want to share, feel free to agree, disagree with any of the panel members. Do we have a couple of mics? It's kind of like a big room. There's a hand up there. Yes, ma'am. And then we'll come to you after that.
Good morning. My name is Christabel Piri from the Southern Africa Trust. I'm just interested in knowing what were your key recommendations from the research.
Excellent question. We'll take a round of questions, and I'll ask my panel members to respond to any of them that they wish to, and just to take note of them. We had a hand up here, and then we'll come to this side. Okay, let's get the mic here. In the meantime, the person with the mic can speak. And just tell us your...
Morning, everyone. My name is Gitumeti Fatima Tamotrati. I am the chairperson and founder of a feminist social movement, Black Women Caucus. In 2019, over 2,000 women marched to the richest square mile in Africa at the heart of capital, demanding greater participation and accountability from the private sector in relation to gender-based violence and femicide. A couple of years later, I'm really pleased to see that this report is released, but at the heart of that march was not only looking at what the cost of the impact of GBV was, it was also a bigger clarion call to say, how does private sector fund the fight towards ending gender-based violence and femicide? And I think that is often a conversation and a narrative that is silenced. The reality is that I come from civil society. I also exist at the nexus of government as well as private sector. And I can tell you that for us to fully eradicate the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, we need money to capacitate organizations, formations in our communities that are doing the work. So I remember in 2019, I still have the list of demands, by the way. Quite audacious demands we made to businesses in 2019. And one of the demands that we made was that a change in the JSE listing criteria to include a 2% levy on the profits of all listed companies to help fund the fight against gender-based violence and femicide. A couple of years later, the demand still stands. Yes, we welcome the establishment of the GBV Response One Fund led by private sector, but only around 146 million rand has been raised from businesses to fund feminist movements and women's organizations. So we need greater accountability. Prof. Mohalut Amile, but I really wanted to also touch on the point on transformational leadership, right? A lot of the demands, a lot of the asks that we're making in relation to gender equality in private sector and society at large not only needs the political will, that political will is married to transformational leadership. And once we have that transformational leadership, we're able to see that institutional change to carry the mandate of gender equality. When we look at the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence, Pillar 5 specifically speaks to economic justice. We're not going to fully address gender inequality if we're not going to speak about how the economy operates and who has access to it and who participates in it. So if we're going to talk about gender-based violence and femicide, let's look at it holistically, right? We're not only going to look at it from the after effects, but we need to look at it from all spheres, from prevention, support, and of course, response. I think I'll hold it at that. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sibongile Ndashe. I am the founder and director of the Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa, which is an organization that works to hold governments accountable for gender and sexuality cases. But I'm also the current co-chair of the Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, which will be held on the 1st and 2nd of November, which is building on the summit that was hosted about 4 years ago in 2018. So thank you for the report. I did struggle to get, and I think maybe you'll come back to this, the moderator asked the question of what are these perceptions and realities, I think, of private sector. So what did you find, in your studies? So I'm still interested in understanding this. But in the conversation, I think there are quite a few things. I don't know whether we are conflating issues or whether we're just kind of using things kind of interchangeably. Ending gender-based violence is obviously going to require all of us to do our bit. And of course, the corporate sector is called upon to do that where they are. But the challenge is when we move the conversation and we're saying it's not a societal conversation, it's also a business conversation, as if business does not exist, in society. I think we are splitting hairs. Because in a country that has got such high levels of violence, to now say we have to create safe spaces at work, and that means to be free from violence, then you have to be employed. So the call that Kito Mitsi was making is, as we say that business is responsible, accountable, and they have to do something in the workplace to eradicate inequality, similarly, we have to talk about what business does outside of, the workplace, like the corporate social investment. Because if the call to business to say to make this yours, you have to promote women, you have to deal with sexual harassment, you have to deal pregnancy discrimination, wage gap, and all of that, we are now basically saying this is where it needs to happen, and then we find business that kind of recycle, their corporate social investment funding to really deal with equality in the workplace that then does not call upon them to respond to the broader societal problem that we are dealing with. So I do think that there is a conversation, to be had there so that we're not only talking about business responding, and that's why the topic of costly impact, because we keep on saying that, corporate South Africa does not really understand what they need to do, to end gender-based violence. And so you have to talk to them about the profit margin, so that's the thing. So we have to make an economic case on why it is important for gender-based violence. And I think the moderator started on this when he introduced the topic, that it is said. But I really think that we should delegitimize that. Like, it is illegitimate to say that we have to make an economic cost, because the cost of gender-based violence is a cost that we all feel when we wake up every morning and we see the headlines and all of that. We don't have to respond to it because there is something in it, for business, and for companies. South Africa is under siege, and we don't have to make a human rights case. We don't have to make an economic case. We have to comprehensively respond. And my last point is the duty to eradicate discrimination. And it is important that we understand this. We are saying that inequality, does play a role in sustaining kind of gender-based violence. In 1992, the CEDAW committee said gender-based violence is a form of discrimination. And I think it is important that we understand this so that we don't confuse what it is that we are called upon to do, Yes, lack of economic empowerment leaves women with no choices. But we have said this over and over again, that gender-based violence transcends class, race, and all sorts of other things. Women don't get beaten up because they are poor, right? Gender-based violence is violence that is targeted at women because they are women, right? So when we are talking about giving women options, like economic empowerment, we are not necessarily eradicating violence. We are dealing with some of the things that can help them, right? To flee, when it comes, to that. So when we understand how discrimination impacts on women, then we will not conflate inequality and gender-based violence. So I will stop there.
Okay, there's a lot of questions. I will give you permission to respond to any of them. You also don't need to respond to any, and those comments can just live as contributions in this space, because there are no mathematical truisms in such a complicated conversation. But I'm going to take the liberty, being friends for 5 minutes, of just prodding you in certain directions. I wonder, Corné, if I can start with you, because there were at least 2 fact-based questions about the research. What are the recommendations was one of them that I think would be great for you to speak into, and also to give some specificity to the very broad issue around perceptions qualitatively that were revealed in the research. What exactly does that refer to?
Great, I'm happy to answer that. One of the key recommendations that came from leaders was that it should be addressing gender-based violence should be included in organizational strategy for multiple reasons. One, obviously the impact that it has on our economy, that again impacts on every dimension of society, but also in terms of well-being. That it's not just an HR issue, but it's an entire organizational issue, was one of the key findings that should be included in policy making going forward. That was a key finding. From the employee's perspective, a key finding was that there was an incredible need for education. Saying from employees' perspectives that there's a lack of knowledge in terms of what exactly gender-based violence is, the scope of it. And from both groups, the private sector leaders as well as employees, there was a key emphasis on multi-sectoral, multi-level collaboration. Because the problem is so complex that it's not just a sector issue. We're always going to have contentious issues, people that feel that we're not addressing it in this way or that way, or should be doing this and doing that, that there is not one single solution to a problem this complex. It should be all sectors collaborating. There's no other way of finding solutions if we are not all going to work together. And not any of us can address the entirety of the problem. So when we're talking about equality, again, it's from different sectors, different levels. And if we're talking about gender-based violence itself, it's going to require education at all levels, including stakeholders such as children being educated, was a key finding.
Thank you. By the way, thank you so much for your energy and keeping it together. It's been 90 minutes on the trot. I promise you, even though we're a little bit over time, we will finish within the next 10 minutes just to manage your psychologies. Gustav, you can respond to anything. Personally, I'd love to hear you respond to at least 2 threads that have come up. Given your interest around health, economics, and also that beautiful opening statement you made about the domestic sphere. And I had the same reaction when I read the report, which is the would-be academic in me would have asked you many questions in a Viva exam about the connections between workplace interventions and the domestic sphere. And if a woman is not safe at home with a protection order in a country with high levels of unemployment, to what extent, to speak into Sibongile's truths, does this kind of focus on the workplace really deal with the structural drivers of femicide in South Africa, in India, where the domestic sphere is so important? I'd love you to speak into that, and whether the entire focus on economic logic is not completely ethically misplaced.
Thank you for interesting question. It's like this, as I told, that if the victim is coming with emotional and poor mental health at the workplace, we are losing. So it's already evident throughout the world that from the public sector, from the policymakers, we could not do so much. Otherwise, in any one country can show us the path or the leadership that, okay, we have eradicated the GBV. No one had successfully done it. That means we could put a big question mark on the public sector and the policymakers, because most of the policies are made in the cold room without any connection to the public or the victims. So if we think other way around, that employees can report it to the employer, that it happened. Even my home, today I have been victimized. So the employer can take care of that. They can support through psychologists, through mental support, through emotional support, and it actually improve the productivity. And we have so many evidence that this little counseling of the victims can give a big boost to their mental health. So public sector has failed. Private sector has the money and the opportunity. So at least they can provide this kind of counseling and mental support or emotional support. Number one. Number two is that to your question, I did forget the name, but I can give you a distinct example from New Zealand. Many cities in New Zealand are full with American tourists and with the alcoholism. So it was full with violence, GBV, all those blah, blah, blah. So what the community has discussed with the alcohol companies, for each bottle of alcohol selling, they will charge $2 extra, and that dollar goes to the community. And through that fund, they invited some volunteers. The volunteers will get some snacks and they put street light. So most of this happened during the dimmy weather or dark. So they put street light, and when the verbal abuse is going on, so they had that big torch light and whistle. So before, the verbal abuse goes up, and then it's the physical, and then it continue, and then sexual, and then I have another research, it's sustenance abuse. They stop food, water, and access to toilet. So when it's starting at this point, these volunteers had whistle, pee, and then focus the torch on their face. Just this $2 each bottle has changed the whole scenario. Now you will find no such GBV in those places. So I am trying to giving you the very simple evidences throughout the world what you can utilize. And as you have repeatedly commented that your public sector has almost failed. So only we have the hope with the private sector.
Okay, I'm going to take 3 interventions, and then we have to close it there. Vuyo, I'll give you the horrible task of choosing 3 random people because I want to be as popular as possible. And there are millions of hands up. It's a good sign. It means that there is occasion for more conversation, and the success criterion in eventing is to quit while you're ahead.
Hello, I'm Mara. I'm the founder of an organization called Tears. We're a national organization. In the last 6 years, we've helped 500,000 women. It's recorded electronically, it's not made up. So we are very, very active in the GBV sector. I want to thank the other activists that have spoken out here. I've walked in the march at the JSE. I sang in the halls in Pretoria. But guys, that's not enough. So that's why we are all here today. But I really wanted to stand up and say, let's remember that GBV is not a beautiful book. It's not a lovely philosophy. It's about a woman or a child who's been hurt. And I just wanted to bring back that to you today, because I'm actually biting back the tears, and I'm not that emotional. I work in Alex, where young girls haven't got the care, and they put their babies into the Yuxkay River, or into bags where the pickers fetch them. We live in a shocking world. Each one of you, please go away and remember that I absolutely value Corné and Tiki and the team who've worked on it. We need to be able to prove to people to get the funding. But let's also remember the starfish principle. It's the one that we help. And that's up to us. Help the people. Please don't forget. We need the statistics to get the money to help the one. That's my end. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Tokozile from Absa Bank, and we are part of Banking on Women. As an organization, I think we continue to learn from companies like Anglo American who've done a lot in the space. As a corporate, my question is around the research itself. To the companies that have said that they have and acknowledge that gender-based violence is a problem, what are some of the key initiatives that they have worked on? I understand our colleague, they spoke about the GBV fund that corporate has worked on, but what else has corporate done and what else are they looking to do? And then to the LinkedIn population that you have, what are some of the other stuff that they feel corporates should do? And it would be great to hear from that as we also look to see how we can contribute. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the contributions from my colleagues. I do just want to make the point that we appreciate every bit of research that comes into the space, because in terms of the NSP on GBVF, we've undertaken to implement solutions that are research-based and evidence-led. It is important, and I take the point that you made, Siswongile, that we don't need to actually make an economic case. But where the economic case becomes important is when we start to talk to the issue that the Black Caucus has raised here today, to say these initiatives need to be funded. If we are to get rid of the scourge of gender-based violence and really make a systemic change in what we are trying to achieve in this country, if women and girls and members of the LGBTQI+ community are going to experience democratic freedom and freedom to be safe in public spaces, we need to invest and we need to spend. And I suppose I speak as a funder and as somebody who's tasked with the responsibility. I'm Lindy Dlamini from the GBVF Response Fund, with the responsibility of supporting organizations that are working so hard to do this. So I can't do this unless these initiatives are being funded. And I say, in the words of Peli Sankomo, not availing resources for this fight is itself violence against women. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry. My name is Hlengi Wendlovo, and I'm a senior lecturer at the Vet School of Governance and a regular attendee of the events and conversations of Shared Value Africa. So my question follows, I think, a series of questions that have been asked. First of all, I guess the significance of launching this report here at JSE is very key around the questions of funding and everything that has been said. But there was a question about the recommendations. What are the recommendations? So mine pushes a little bit further than that, to say, in our several discussions, we've spoken about moving beyond the discussions, moving beyond the boardroom politics, and tapping into action in terms of what do we do after writing these reports. So my question is related to, are there any accountability mechanisms that you are recommending on the report that are sort of like to make a follow-up, to say people do not just commit, these companies, you know, in addition to committing to funding, because funding is very much needed, but in their own backyards, what are they doing? Are they reporting gender-based abuses? Are they keeping check of you know, everything that's happening? But most importantly, how are they going to account that this report is not just wasted work, because there is a lot of work that went into researching and writing the report. So what happens post this report? Thank you.
Can I respond to it?
We'll take a final comment, and we're going to close it there, I'm afraid. I do have a flight to catch.
I'll be quick then. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nkosinathi Moshwana. I'm CEO of a company called Prime Stars. I want to thank Tiki Vuyo and the team for the invite today, and of course the JSE for hosting us. There's a point that you mentioned, Eusebius, earlier on, and also heard the panel speaking about it roughly. One was around how the perpetrators need to be part of the solution. From your perspective and from a panel perspective was around how one of the learnings from this was that young people need to be taught around this topic. So the work that we do is in that space, and we had the pleasure of launching a project called What About the Boys here a few weeks ago. And I'm really looking forward to collaborating with shared value to get this program out there. My question is around dealing with a preventative perspective, particularly in this multi-sector perspective. In the program, we are talking about how we need to raise better men and raise a nation of good men by redefining masculinity and getting them out of the traditional stereotypes of masculinity. Don't cry, don't be vulnerable, you show your power through violence, you don't play with dolls, etc., etc. And this weekend, we're kicking it off. And what I wanted to ask is, what are your thoughts, particularly in your learnings, because we lean on you as experts in the GBV space around dealing with boys, starting with boys in order to raise a nation of good men, one. And from a private sector perspective, what has been the interest in men in their roles as individuals to want to become good role models and model the behaviors we want to see our boys growing up to, because that's what we're trying to achieve with our initiative. And I'd be very keen to understand what have been those kind of learnings so that we can learn from you to ensure we can achieve that together.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I forgot one. For anyone who needs a book, Vuyo has been kind enough to allow us to share our book. Please do collect it from us. Thank you. But I love your input.
I really wish we had 2 hours. Every single question deserves a full discussion, but we don't. The last question is just stunning. We haven't even begun to talk about different ways of being male in the world, because that's actually the beginning of changing behavior. And the dots between being differently male and fighting gender violence is probably where the hard work needs to be done. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'm going to give my panelists 60 seconds each, so they have to cherry pick a moment that most moved them and be satisfied with a rich conversation that will linger on. We'll start with you, Gustav.
Yes. The first response is, in the low and middle income countries, including South Africa, except the private companies' profit-making business, most of the project programs and interventions are not being monitored and evaluated. That's why we are missing transparency. As we are missing transparency, there is corruption. So from this report, I request that you should do something and have some independent evaluation. And my response to that gentleman in the back, I'm very poor in name. So most importantly, that there are evidence around the world how at the community level they have controlled and almost eliminated GBV. It doesn't matter at the boys or girls, irrespective of the sex. Corne told we have now almost 52 such sexes identification. Okay. So please contact me for any evidence you need throughout the world. I am more than happy to share with you. If you can use it and stop it, I'll be more than happy. And most importantly, another thing I want to remind all of you, this part we have done from the employer's perspective and in the private sector. The most importantly, we had not done the research on the victim's perspective and perpetrator perspective. So next few days and few months, we are planning to do it. And hopefully end of this year or at the beginning of next year, we will come with a full scientific report from all square perspective. And that will be one documentation for South Africa.
Anesu, 45 seconds.
Okay, as for me, I will continue needing to work in this space of gender-based violence, because without statistics, we can't necessarily evaluate the impact of the gender-based violence. Yes.
Thank you. And then Prof. Davis, love your energy, love your commitment and your intellect and politics. What are your final thoughts? Maybe also weave in the one practical thing we can all take to our places of work beyond this.
My final thought, please read the report. All the information is in there that you've been waiting for. My major contribution to this project is as an academic, and I call on all of you to strengthen the relationship with academia, with us, that we can do to implement change, and to position gender-based violence as a topic within business communication. This is what our major contribution has been, but you'll find all the answers and statistics in the report. Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, from my side, just remains to do 2 things. Firstly, all our speakers for the whole morning, including the panel, can we give them a round of applause? And then lastly, Tiki is excellent, but she is also appropriately self-effacing and recognizes she's not a one-woman organization. There's a whole bunch of excellent persons, happen to be women, that actually run this company of hers and does so admirably. And one of them is Vuyo Lutseke, who of course is Director of Shared Value Africa Initiative. I am going to take a vow of silence, which is good for men to sometimes do. And Vuyo can have the final say. Can we please welcome Vuyo as well?
Oh, what a morning. That was intense and complex and very interesting. But thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And thank you for sticking around for this extra few minutes. Today is a day that we put a mirror up to society, up to ourselves, right? And reflect on what we are truly doing to address gender-based violence and femicide and advancing gender equality within private sector and society. And as we do so, we also want to acknowledge that we are, as the Shared Value Africa Initiative and our partners are here today, we know we are standing on shoulders of many, many, many who have done this work for decades, right? Especially now in this month that we're in now. And to mix metaphors, we're also standing alongside many who continue to do the work. So I just want to also acknowledge those who are part of this movement, part of this army, right? That's working to do the work that we're doing. And we are just so blessed to have our voice be part of this as well from today, well, and going forward. So the Shared Value Africa Initiative may have started the It's Not Okay movement as a call to action in response to, right, the scary statistics that we see increasing continuously around gender-based violence against women, violence against women in our society, but has grown to have a wide range of programs that drive this cause. This, of course, includes understanding not just what gender-based violence is within the workplace environment, but also how it affects all of us, right? So it was so up for us to have a collaboration with University of Johannesburg, Mid-Sweden University, KPMG South Africa, and initiating this research project and having the smart minds that are here alongside myself to really lead that part of the project. We just want to be able to acknowledge that we need to build on the work that is done by all, right? And relentlessly mobilize our commitments into tangible action, right? We're talking a lot today about it's not just the private sector, it is about all sectors coming together. What has become clear to us was that for the most part, the private sector was a missing link in certain ways, in that, you know, we still have to talk about how it can fully embrace its role in achieving gender equality within not just South Africa, but across borders. So you will see on the report as well, there's a lot of, I guess, highlighting the need for multi-sectoral collaboration. It's always been clear, it's always been suggested in reports even before this, but there is immense power in working together across private sector, state and public entities, civil society, and of course, as Corné said earlier, academia. So on behalf of the Shared Value Africa Initiative, I just want to express our humble gratitude to our partners in the research project, Prof. Corné Davis, Dr. Anesu Kudzai, and the University of Johannesburg, as well as Prof. Gustav and Mid-Sweden University for leading the research that we have here today. KPMG South Africa, you know, heeded the call to continue to use your brand, your voice, your expertise to put to paper the impact of GBV, a journey that was started 2014, even before that, but you continue to show your commitment by participating in this research project as well. The working group itself of this project was made up of Travonica Naidi from KPMG, I know Travanica's here with us somewhere, Lizzle McLennan, Mariette Duplessis, and of course our very own Tiki Barnard. Further support was provided by Sazini Mojapelo, David Davis, as well as Avin Mahadu, which was really much appreciated in getting us through this to this final product. And of course, we want to acknowledge Tamani Advisory and Typo Printing. I wanted to give a special thanks to Prof. Mervyn King, as he has left us, not just for joining us here today, but his support in writing the forward in the project, in the report as well, and also our other esteemed speakers today, Mr. Ignatius Sahule, who as CEO of a major corporation, as I mentioned earlier, continue to demonstrate the commitment to a cause such as this one, and positioning, GBV as not just a social issue, but as a business one as well. Prof. Mahale as well, in his absence, I want to thank him for having joined us today and showing his support and galvanizing fellow business leaders to do the same. Thank you, Eusebius, our program director, for once again leading us through, today's proceedings on a very complex, sensitive subject that we also know that today's conversation is not going to be the end of it, right? We have many more and we have a lot of work to do as we do so. And a final word to our partners in launching this event today, being the JSE team, Pelisa, who helped us start out earlier today, as well as the Mail and Guardian, whose support has been incredibly meaningful in getting us here today, but getting this report to the right eyes and ears. We look forward to working together with all of you to challenge leaders to do more and more and more. Just to let everyone know that the report will be available online, so everyone who's registered to attend will get the email link, but our attendees here at the JSE, as you go out, the report is ready for you to pick up and get that. And I think for me, as closing thought, it's, we want to highlight the fact that purpose-driven leaders know that gender equality is not about doing the right thing, but it's also about the smart thing to do, right? While we started this research as SVAI in South Africa, as a Pan-African organization, we will continue, as Gustav mentioned earlier, there's more research to be done, but even for us to continue to do the work that we do across the continent and get more voices, but also more action, right? And galvanize more to do what is right and what is urgent within our society. And we will update our entire network as we continue to do so. And we would like to urge all companies, all organizations to explore the learning and unlearning that is needed to not just acknowledge, but to respond to this persistent power imbalance that still plagues our society. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.